We'll sing this hymn together and then we'll be dismissed to our classes. How shall the young secure their hearts and guard their lives from sin? Thy word of choicest rules impart to keep the conscience clear. To keep the conscience clear. It is like the sun of heavenly light that ignites us all the day, and through the ages of the night, a lamp to light our way, a lamp to light our way. Thy word is everlasting truth, how pure is every page. That holy book shall guide our youth, and well us upon our way, and well us upon our way. You're dismissed. I like that song because you mentioned that song.
I love that song.
Sonny makes it. And
Nice.
the next one is going to be How Great Thou Art.
I love that song.
You guys throw them out there and song where you get that stuff.
You know, I just read a story about Elvis Presley that he had promised his mom he would sing How Great Thou Art at her funeral. Terrible. Let's hope peace reigns just the same. Tonight, I'm actually not teaching in here. I'm just kind of pinch hitting for Robert Klaus. Robert Klaus, if you don't know it, has COVID. What a time to have COVID. And so he's still not feeling well. And so he's supposed to begin tonight on Providence in here. And so I'm just going to kind of give a little lesson, nothing big, and we'll kind of set the stage for a couple of ideas that maybe he'll get into as well. What I want to do is I want to take the story of the Exodus, some parts maybe you've never studied or never looked at, and you'll see why I'm bringing that in after we get into it, because we're talking about providence tonight. I will point this out to you. You might take a look at some of this. So this is what I believe, and it's at the base of what I'm really trying to teach tonight. First of all, that miracles aren't magic, and that's a really important teaching that a lot of people don't seem to have ever thought it through. And by that, what I mean is they are known methods by God. I don't know the methods, but that doesn't mean they're not methods. It's like a child flipping on the switch. He sees the light come on. That's me saying my prayer, right? I see the light come on. But as a child, he has no knowledge whatsoever about hydroelectric or coal-driven power that creates generations of electricity that comes down the wire. He has no knowledge of anything to do with electrical engineering or anything like that. It doesn't mean that that's not happening. It just simply means he doesn't need to know. And so too, however God does things, it's not a miracle. He doesn't, to him, it's not a miracle. It's what he can do. And he can do on so many different levels that we tend to categorize them as miracles. And then we tend to categorize them as wonders. And then we tend to categorize them as signs. And then we tend to categorize them as providence. And that makes us feel better about it. It's not so much that the Bible makes a big deal about that, but that's what we do because it makes us feel better about it. Be honest with you. So if you go into the Bible just a little bit, a moment ago, I think the scripture that I had up there, maybe I'm wrong, but it was Exodus 3:20. Let's go to a couple of scriptures and just read a little bit, and then you'll see where I'm going with all of this in just a moment. And it really is about providence. It may not sound like it at first, but Exodus 3:20. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders. That's a word he uses, which I will do in its midst. And after that, he will let you go. So wonders, what are wonders? That's an interesting discussion point. What is a wonder? And so kind of looking at that, Genesis, if I could get a reader or two, I'd like 3 different readers. Genesis 1:14, Exodus 15:11, and then Acts 2 and verse 22. And just read loud. The room kind of soaks up the sound. So if you're willing to read, please. I need a reader for Genesis 1 and verse 14. And this is an important read, by the way, Genesis 1:14. Go ahead, Dan.
Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. And let them be signs, let them be for signs and seasons, for days and years."
Okay, are days and years miracles? Are there things that can happen? Do we still have days and years? Or is that only something that we see that we can't explain? We kind of know how we have, unless you're a flat earther, you know we have how days happen, right? The earth spins, you're aware of that, right? At about 1,000 miles an hour, right? In years, we make one trip around the sun, about 365 and a quarter days, right? So we know those things. Those are real. They really are methods. I may not fully understand how that's able to be happening, but it is real. We can see it. We can observe it. And yet, the things out there, including the stars, the moon, the sun, and all the various things that might be flying around, what was the first thing he said it was for? Signs. Yeah, well, so signs and seasons are things that happen, right? So signs apparently can be what we would normally think is natural events, right? Apparently, because he mentions them right there. Let's read the next one. Exodus 15, verse 11. Anybody? Yes, sir. Go for it, brother. Wonders. There's no specific on what a wonder is. And if you follow that all through scriptures, you will not find a definition of what a wonder is. But I tell you what it'll do, it'll make you wonder. And so it's something wonderful, but, you know, a baby being born is pretty wonderful, isn't it? I mean, there are a lot of wonderful things that happen that we don't necessarily attribute to because the word makes us feel a little better being able to categorize it over there. Miracles, we don't tend to categorize it over there. And I understand that, generally speaking, a miracle is an inexplainable thing. But quite honestly, you can't explain much of anything about what God does. You really have no idea, truly, how things came to be the way they are, except that God did it. That's about it. That's about all you got. And whether you know you like it or not, you want to be able to explain everything. They try, but they've about decided they've been wrong about the Big Bang now forever. And that's been something they were 100% sure. They've been teaching that in schools and everything. And now they're going, I don't know now. I don't know. I mean, the latest thing they've seen is just kind of messing them up. Acts 2:22. Someone read that for me. Acts 2:22. It's all going to begin to make a little more sense in a minute. Need a reader. Acts 2:22. Don't be shy. Anybody? Go ahead, Adam. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir. Should be about Jesus. All right. Mighty works. A lot of your Bibles will translate that miracle because it's the word mighty, which is miracle is directly connected to what word? Anybody know what the word is? It's close to something that we use to blow things up. Dynamis. Yeah, it's like dynamite. So that's the main word for miracle, something dynamite, powerful. And so generally speaking, miracles are attributed to things that either happen instantaneously or that's absolutely convicting that God did it. Whereas some of these signs and wonders, maybe not so much, but definitely when we talk about providence, a lot of people say, you could look at that different ways. So I want to suggest to you, not only are miracles not magic, but providence is not lucky coincidence. So it's more than what we tend to look at it. We tend to look at it as a natural, lucky coincidence. You may not look at it that way, but a lot of people do. And when they hear you say something about your prayers being answered, they'll often write it off as that's just a coincidence that it happened that way. Okay, so coincidence of providence, Genesis 22 and verse 13. You might take a look at that one. In Genesis, let me just tell you about these so we got a little more time. Genesis 22:13. You remember when Abraham was going to offer Isaac? And then the Lord told him by his angel to stay your hand, don't do it, right? He turns around and what does he see? He sees a ram with his antlers caught in a bush behind him, that he has a perfect sacrifice. Now, listen to me. I do not believe at all, and no one would ever be able to convince me that God created that ram in that bush. I believe that was a ram that had been born at some point, walked around those hills, grew antlers, got his head caught in that bush. I am fully convinced that's what happened. But that it happened at that moment, that wasn't a coincidence. That was providence, right? Okay. You say, well, it was a miracle. Well, if you want to use that word, I'm okay with it. But then we go to Haman. Remember in Esther chapter 6, Haman, the Agagite, the enemy of Israel. What happens to Haman in chapter 6? You remember, he's out to get Mordecai. He thinks he's got him, right? And then the king, Ahasuerus, that night, it couldn't sleep. And so he reads his chronicles that night because it's so boring. He's convinced it'll help him go to sleep. But he doesn't go to sleep. And as they're reading, they come across the story of where Mordecai told the king's servants about two of his servants that were going to try to kill him. And as a result, the king says, well, what'd I do for him after, he did that and saved me from being assassinated? And they said, there's nothing in the record. You didn't do anything for him. He said, well, I need to do something for him. And so anyway, the next day, he's thinking about that in the morning, and Haman comes in, and Haman's after Mordecai. He's got a plan. He's already got the gallows built, to impale him. He's really up to do it. And as he's walking in, the king says, What would you do for someone who had really saved your, King wants to bless him in the biggest way possible. And Haman, because of his ego, says, he's got to be talking about me. So he says, I'd put him on the king's horse. I'd put the king's robe around him, and I'd march him around the town. He says, okay, you go get Mordecai and put him on my horse and march him around town. Timing. And there's several in Esther, but I'm just mentioning that one. And then all good things and all bad things. Let's go to Genesis 50 and verse 20. Someone I need to read Genesis 50, 20. Raise your hand if you're willing to read that. Somebody, come on. Come on, volunteer. I know y'all used to sit and soak. Dan, you read that? I need Romans 8, 28. Somebody else. I got 2 readers. I got to have somebody else in here that's willing to read. There we go. Got it. Owen. So, Genesis 50, verse 20. Dan, if you've got that. And then Owen, Romans 8, 28.
But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about in this day, to save many people alive.
So good things and bad things could be controlled somehow, not necessarily planned, but controlled, and God could make them turn out for good. Even an evil thing meant by someone, God could turn that into good. Now, I don't know how God could do that, but I also, as a child, didn't know how that turbine worked down there at the dam that kept us having electricity. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Okay, so all things. Now, what I want to do now is I want to take you through this idea that I believe a lot more of the stuff that happened in the Bible happened predominantly not the miracle way. They happen through things that we tend to think are natural, but aren't. They are, but they aren't. They're not coincidences, so they're not. They are the work of God, as we just saw, good and evil, things that get done. God works it all out. How He does it, honestly, none of us know. So from that perspective, if a miracle is something you don't understand, well, then you call it a miracle. I don't think that's enough definition for a miracle. But let's go with that if that makes you feel good. But bottom line, you wanted to say it's a sign. Okay, we'll go with that. If you want to say it's a wonder, fine. I'm just saying it's of God. And a lot of what happens in your Bible, what I've noticed we tend to do is this is what I was kind of taught. What happened back there was all miracles. And then in the New Testament, Jesus is all miracles. And now what happens? None of it's miracles. Okay, I don't believe that. I believe God works in our life. He's been working in people's life all along, and He's doing stuff all the time. I believe He's working in your life. He's working in my life. He's working stuff together. And you say, well, I don't know how He's doing it. Yeah, and you shouldn't. You're a child flipping that switch. You have no idea how that turbine works. And you think, well, it's a miracle. It's magic. No, it's not magic. God knows exactly what He's doing. He knows exactly. I heard it this way. He said God can get in His car, drive it down the road, and get out, and He didn't affect the nature of the car. And so, too, He can drive the wind down the road and get out and not affect the nature of the wind. He can drive events down the road and get out and not affect the nature of the events. He can do whatever He pleases. And because you don't understand it, you want to say, no, He doesn't do that. And what I'm trying to tell you is, you don't understand any of it. You don't understand providence. You don't understand miracles. But that doesn't mean He doesn't. God's not up in heaven going, how did I do that? You know? I don't know how that happened. I healed that man. How did I do that? No. He knows exactly how He did it. He knows exactly how Jesus walked on the water. He knows exactly how He stilled the storm. He knows exactly how He made the blind man see. He knows how He did it. You don't. And we weren't meant to. And that's exactly right. That doesn't mean everything that happens, you might not know if you looked at it. I want to do that with the Exodus, and I want to show you a few things. All right, so let's talk about the Sinai Peninsula. You know, the Sinai Peninsula used to not be the Sinai Peninsula. There's no indication that Mount Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula. Historically, that has not been what it was called. Historically, that was never called, that nobody ever recognized that Mount Sinai was in the Sinai Peninsula. The Bible doesn't say that. But it's become historically happy to believe that because in about the late 1800s, somebody thought that they did it, and the Catholic Church bought into it, and they put a monastery down there on a mountain. And I don't believe that's where it happened at all. Now, you're just looking at me. Now, you don't have to believe what I'm fixing to say, but I'm going to show you some things, okay? I'm going to show you some things the way it may have happened. How's that? May have happened in ways you never thought about. And some of you are not going to like this. And that's okay. But I want you to get you thinking that God's bigger than you might think. And He can make stuff happen in ways that you never thought about God doing it. That's what we're going to do. Number one. Here we go. So that's the Sinai Peninsula. Let me see if I got a button here. I think I do. Do I have a button there? Yeah. All right. So that's the Sinai Peninsula. And you saw a minute ago, that's not what it was known as up until 1820. It was never called that. In fact, it had a turquoise name that it was, and this was Egypt. When they left Egypt in the Exodus, that was Egypt. So was that, and so was that, and so was that down here, so was that down here. All the way down to Cush. That was Egypt. All of that was Egypt. Now, an interesting thing, I want to show you something else here. Let's go we'll come back to that in a minute. So here's an interesting thing. If you ever study history, you will find there was then and there is now a road right there. They could have got to the promised land in about 2 days. There's a road there. Was back then. That's not a new road. It just is paved now. But there, what do you think? You think if you were taking a camel that you go, well, I don't want to go that way. We'll go around. No, you go the shortest distance, right? There was a way to get. And so I'll show you something now. So when they ended up here instead of there, Pharaoh thought that they got mixed up. And you ever heard that? He thought you got mixed up. You've gone the wrong direction. Instead of going up, you went down. What are you doing? They were confused. Now, let me back it up just a little bit here. I want to show you now what really happened is there was some interesting things in history that happened. The Hyksos, which the word isn't used in the Bible. It's called shepherd kings in the Bible. But that's what they were. Hyksos means shepherd kings. And so what happened is, you remember a guy named Joseph? Right? What happened to the people that lived in let me go back. And all of this area when Joseph was, what happened? What? A famine, right? Drove them all to where? Where there was food. Where was their food? Egypt. Why was there food in Egypt? God had told Joseph what was going to happen, but He actually told the king Pharaoh how it was going to happen, right? Do you remember how that the king Pharaoh and all of his people hated shepherds? Do y'all remember that? You don't remember that? Well, we can look into that another day. Just believe me right now, because when his family came, he kind of kept it like on the low key that they were shepherds over sheep. Why did they dislike them so much? Because of what happened with the Hyksos. So the Hyksos are shepherd kings they're starving to death over here, and they all move to Egypt. So it wasn't just feeding the people in Egypt. Everybody moved to Egypt. In fact, some of the cities down here were literally taken over by the shepherds. And as a result, because they had so many thousands move in on them to eat, because they're starving to death, right? Well, they ended up having to sell everything they got to them. So Egypt ended up getting richer and richer and richer and richer. So they didn't just get rich off of the people living up here in Goshen, which is Israel. It got rich off of everybody living near the Nile and everybody else. That's the Hyksos. That really happened. That's not make-believe. That's in your history books, and it started about 1900 BC. We know it for a fact. It ain't amazing. We know that happened, okay? They used to think that they took over Egypt. They didn't take over Egypt. Some of them did some, fighting, but they didn't take over Egypt. They went there for food. So when they began to realize there were more shepherds than there were Egyptians, they wanted them to leave. So the Exodus is not a shocking concept. They actually kind of didn't want them anymore. They just wanted to hold on to Israel because they were kind of in like Flint with them, had been there about 300-400 years. And they got scared of them, especially because they knew people. All right. Next thing. So I want you to look up here at the word. That's Hyksos. That's background. Gilgals. You ever heard the word Gilgal? If you read your Bible, you'll find when they take the promised land, you hear the term Gilgal. You hear it over and over again. What's weird about it, it's never in the same place. Everybody says, well, that's a town, but it's never in the same place. It's over here, then it's over here, then it's over here, then it's over here. How in the world Gilgal moved around? Until we actually found out what Gilgal means and how it moved around. Gilgal actually means a circle of stones. And what they've found so far is 5, but they think there may be as many as 6 or 7 of them. And what they are is a shape. And it's shaped like this. Looks like the bottom of a shoe. Do you remember when it says that wherever you put your shoe, that will be your land? They literally built a shoe in the ground, and there now we can find 3 clear as day and as many as 5 of them, and they're in different places. It's where they're encamped. That's why they're called Gilgals. So Gilgal was where they put apparently where they put the tent of meetings, where they worshiped every time they stopped. And so that's why, so when you read your Bible now, Gilgals. I'm getting to the interesting stuff. Well, hold on. This is boring stuff. I know. So the Midianites. All right. Whoops. Went too far. Midianites. So the Midianites, right? Let me go back one more. So the Midianites, what they want to tell you is when you study your Bible, they lived in there. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. No Midianites lived in there. And they tried to tell you over here. They didn't live over there either. They lived over here. This is Midian. The whole area. In fact, all the way down into here. Encompass Mecca today. That's the Midianites. They live from all the way up in that area at the back. So Midianites are not where you thought. The point of the reason I point that out is, if that's true, what I've just told you is, and I told you, and that's true up there, then guess, this isn't Sinai. It's somewhere over here. Now, what's interesting about that is this, somewhere right over in here is where the Garden of Eden was. Oh, we know now. We know where the river Pison was. We know now. It's obvious. If you get your archaeological look, you can see it. And under all of this sand is still a giant river. So one of the largest bodies of water anywhere in the world is under that sand right there. All right. Let me go further, though. I want to show you something here. So we'll go. So now the next thing is the sea. Now, what you may not have known is not some, every reference to the Red Sea in the Old Testament never says Red Sea. Sea of reeds every time. What does that mean? That means it was predominantly fresh water. Reeds will not grow in the ocean. So the papyri, it wasn't the ocean. Now, it later connected to it because the Egyptians built a canal. Well, let me go back now and show you. So this area right here, I'm going to show you a better picture. Let me get a better picture here. Let me get a better picture. Where's that? I had a picture for you. No, it's not there. Wait a minute. Go back a little further. There it is. So there's a canal right there today, right? We know the canal is here. But this right here was called the Bitter Lakes, or the Sea of Reeds in Egyptian day. It's 80 meters deep. Fresh water. But it was also connected to the Red Sea. So in the New Testament, it says Red Sea once or twice. In the Old Testament, it always says Sea of Reeds. That, going back now, let me go back to the other picture. That is probably where they crossed. And that's why it confused them, because they didn't go up here and go the normal way. They went that way, and then they went this way. And it even recounts, it appears to stop at a fort here that was an Egyptian fort. And then they stopped here, which is the outskirts of Egypt, and that's Elam. And then they came down here, likely because even to this day, there is a bubbling up of water out of the ground right there that's called the Well of Moses, where water comes straight out of the ground and it bubbles in several different places coming out of the ground. And that's still to this day. You can see it, look it up. Get your phone out, look it up if you don't believe me. So now there's guys now trying to tell you this is where Sinai, the Mount Sinai is. No, that's not it either. So what I want to take you to is, let's go to Exodus chapter 19 quickly for the sake of time. Exodus chapter 19. We ain't got a lot of time. I'm sorry. I'm trying to bundle a bunch of stuff together. And what I'm trying to show you is that God's been at work in ways that we have thought He was working a different way, because we thought we understood everything. And I don't think we understand much of anything God's been doing. Let me start back up in Exodus. I'm going to read this time for the sake of time. Exodus 19, I'm going to start in verse 26. Then it came to pass on the third day, this is Exodus 19, verse 16. Sorry, I said 26, 16. Then it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly, and the blast of the trumpet sounded long and became louder and louder. Moses spoke, and God answered him by voice. Then the Lord came down upon the mountain and the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. The Lord said, "Go down, warn the people, lest they break through to gaze at the Lord, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them." But Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it." By the way, you can find those even to this day. Verse 24, Then the Lord said to him, "Away, get down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the priests, the people, break through to come up to the Lord, lest He break out against them." So Moses went down to the mountain and spoke to them. I believe that was a volcano. And here's the most interesting thing about that, is that everybody in the area, do you remember Moses' father-in-law? He talked about the mountain of God before Moses ever talked about it. He told him where it was. He talked about what it was. And it was called the mountain of God by the Midianites. They already knew it. What's a mountain? How do you know a thing is a mountain of God? How do you know that a mountain is a mountain of God? A mountain's a mountain. Unless it had been kind of getting their attention for a long time, which is what I believe happened. Let's go to that without getting into all that. So here's the most interesting mountain on the planet. There's nothing like this anywhere else in the world. Comes a little close about 2 times, but nope. This is the only black and white volcano sitting side by side. In fact, there's only bits of kind of white volcanoes in the world. But to have an absolute jet black volcano right next to a white volcano, when have you ever seen a white volcano anyway? And how long have these been erupting? This is a field of volcanoes that stretches over, let me go back, see if I can get the picture again. It stretches, if you can see it, this area. You see all that black? That's lava. That's lava. Lava, 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 lava. Flowed all the way down. If you look at a bigger picture, it goes all the way down here. There's lava everywhere. In the New Testament, we have an interesting statement in Corinthians. That rock which followed them in the wilderness. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 10. How does a rock follow you? Of course, if we take it spiritual, then it was just a spiritual meaning. But it might not have been. Might not have been at all. Take you back now. Okay, so if you look at these scriptures, let's start right here. Let's read a couple of scriptures because all I'm doing is talking right now. We're not going to have time for any of this. Even though that Kyber, that's probably one of the more interesting things we could talk about. Let's go to Galatians chapter 1 and verse 17. Galatians chapter 1 and verse 17. Anybody got it? I ain't got it yet. Anybody? Galatians 1 and verse 17. I'll show you why we're looking at it in just a second. Because we're going to look at Galatians 4 and verse 25 right after this. Okay, let's do Galatians 1:17. Who's got it? Go for it. One of you. Why did Saul leave and go to Arabia? What was in Arabia? Never heard that answered, have you? Never heard that discussed in a Bible class. Guarantee you never heard it. It's because of what we're talking about now. Go, you got 4 in verse 27? Yes, sir. Go ahead, that's not it.
For it is written, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For the desolate has many more children.
I'm sorry.
She who has a husband.
I'm sorry. That's actually, no, it's verse 25. I don't know how I got 20. It's Galatians 4:25. I said 27. I'm sorry.
For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children.
So, according to that text, where is Sinai? Mount Sinai, Arabia. So guess where it ain't? If that's true, it ain't there. That's never been Arabia. Never. We have no record of that ever being called Arabia. Ever. It was Egypt. It's part of Egypt for a long time. It was never part of Arabia. This is Midian. This is Arabia. Okay? Now, the significance of that is this. Well, where and how would they have known the mountain of God? How does people who's not inspired, who are just regular Joes that end up a daughter marrying Moses, how do they know about the mountain of God? Well, that's, of course, makes perfect sense when you begin to understand where the mountain of God is. Which I'll show you something that makes this really interesting. Eden, Garden of Eden, Mecca, and Sinai, all in Saudi Arabia. If you don't pick up on that and go, what does that mean? I'm not telling you what it means. I'm just telling you that's the truth. Eden, Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and so is Sinai, or Horeb. Now, what you might notice, you won't be able to see it on this because, but if you could see it, this word right here is Herat. Herat. Because this is called the Herat. All of this. Now, that's actually a small area in comparison to all the land that has volcanoes. I mean, it's actually, if you can see it, you'll see little pegs here. Do you see those little red, yellow pegs? That's where we're talking about, right there. Now, what's interesting is I have a little yellow peg right there. And that little yellow peg is 40 miles from that. And that little yellow peg is Kyber. Now I'm telling you why he went to Saudi Arabia, because Kyber was there. You ever heard of the Khyber Pass? Right? A lot of the Muslims have named several places Khyber. Why? That's significant. So Khyber, as you'll see, you want to do a little reading on it. Genesis. Khyber is a city near this mountain, totally Jewish. And it was totally Jewish scholars since at least 800 BC till 600 AD, when Muhammad's followers ended up destroying it. And first they subjugated all the Jews, and then they ran them all off about another 50 years later. You should go look it up. You should just go look at it. Look it up. Don't look at me. You go look it up. And apparently this was a place of scholars. Why did Saul or Paul go to Arabia? Where did he go? There's only one place to go, and that is to Sinai. Who else went to Sinai? Do you remember another fellow who went to Sinai? Do you remember when there's a lady called Jezebel? And she was going to kill somebody. Who was she going to kill? Elijah. Right. And Elijah just leaves Samaria, way up there. Let's see if I can get back. No, back. Samaria. Oh, I don't even have it on that map. Let me go back one more. I'm going the wrong way. Going the wrong way. See if I can get it there. Okay. So Samaria is about right in there. So how far can you walk in a day on the average? Average. 5-10 miles. So 40 days. He went 40 days. How far can you walk in about 40 days if you really pushed yourself? Close to 400 miles. Guess how far Samaria is from that mountain? Almost exactly 400 miles. Now, what's really interesting is there's a cave there. You ever heard of him being in a cave? Do y'all remember that text? I think I actually read this when I was doing that thing on the breeze the other day about him being in the cave and coming out. Remember there was a cave, right? It's a mile-long cave there. It's not a cave like a normal cave. It is a lava flow cave. But it's huge, and it's been there like forever because it's full of bones. It looks like it's been lived in and everything for hundreds of years. But Khyber's what's interesting. Let me get back to Khyber. So Khyber apparently they named the Khyber Pass after it because they killed the Jews there. They destroyed the Jews there. And Khyber was this village where there was all kinds of water. There's tons of water there. Here in this desert, look it up. Look it up. Why am I telling you all this? Okay. I think we don't think. We don't believe things happen this way. They couldn't happen this way. It had to be magical. You follow me? We could get into the plagues and how God could have done that without being any magic. Well, then, how do you know God did it? You've misunderstood. I believe absolutely God did it. Everything. And sometimes you can actually see how God did it. And instead of that making me doubt it, that makes me know He did it for sure, for sure. And what I'm trying to tell you is that everything He said He did, He did. Everything. One of the interesting things, look at this. I want to show you something else. It's kind of interesting. This will make a little sense to some of you. If you look up, well, I didn't mean to do that. If you look up the primary airflow, the way the wind blows. That may not make any sense to you right now, but stay with me. Primary airflow, the way the wind blows, most of the year, is from right down here across there. Literally comes off of Saudi Arabia and goes across Cairo. If you have an eruption, you create a column, that pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day, that you know exactly where you need to go. And you don't have any doubt. What's interesting about it is, but it does change. And what it would make you do if you stayed under it in the middle of a desert is do a circle around this thing. And what you may not realize is this is desolate now. It wasn't then. It had trees everywhere then. Not only that, but there were villages and cities all around this area back then. Much of what you've not thought about is how did they eat? Well, they got manna. Well, manna was just a sugar thing to make up for the lack of sugar in their diet. That's a sweet thing. That's all that's for. That's not going to feed them totally everything they need. And not everybody even wants it. Not everybody here is a sweet tooth. Some of you wouldn't eat anything sweet if you forced it on you nearly. You don't even like sweet stuff. But a lot of people want something sweet every now and then. Manna was sweet. Read it. I'm not making this stuff up. So basically, let me go back now. Let me go back to this. So the rock, right? The rock that followed them, right? Now you know how it might have happened without me getting into it too deep. This is a whole 12-week study anyway. So, and then Khyber, where they lived while they were there. You got to live somewhere. Where you going to live? You going to spend. How long were they basically at the foot of Mount Sinai? Do you remember? What does Numbers tell you? How long did they live at the foot of Mount Sinai? A year. They lived there a year. And then what did they do? They gathered up and they went to take the land. So they went up to take the land, right? Got up there and then they balked, right? And so the Lord made them go back. And so they spent the next 39 years going around a circle out there in the wilderness, which makes perfect sense if they've got a bunch of cities out there. Here's the one thing. If you go back, now read Numbers 33 particularly, 33, 34. Go back and read Numbers 33, and here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. I want you to look up every one of those cities and tell me what it means. Because every word in Judaism, Jewish teaching, Hebrew means something. There are no meanings for those. Why are there no meanings for the camps? Almost none of the places that they camped has a name that meant anything in Hebrew. Why? Because it wasn't Hebrew. Wasn't Hebrew. It's another town. It's another group of people. Where do you think Baal of Peor happened? That's people. People lived there. They traded with them. They fought with some of them. Some of them they got in battles. We forget all this. We didn't study. We have not studied the Exodus like we ought to. What I'm trying to tell you is that it all makes sense once you actually begin to look at where it probably happened, because it definitely happened in Saudi Arabia, because I haven't quoted anything out of context there. You know that Galatians 4 says what I just said. It happened in Saudi Arabia. It didn't happen in Sinai Peninsula. There's not enough room there for you to do it anyway. There's no place to stand or sleep. If you look at those valleys around the hills that they try to call it, you can't gather 1 million people in that area. All right. So now Khyber is where they live. The cave probably explains one of the miracles that we don't understand. One of the miracles that happens with Moses is that he goes up to Sinai. The people stay back. He goes up, remember? Well, how long is he up there? Do you remember? And they start wondering about him. How long is he up there? 40 days. That's right. And what do we know he didn't do? He didn't eat bread or drink. Didn't eat or drink for 40 days. Now listen to me. I believe that could be an absolute 100% total miracle right there. Or there may be another explanation. Because what we do know about that cave I told you about, now there doesn't have water in it. That's all I'm talking about. What we do know is that around that area were a lot of what we call hyenas. A lot of them were not the spotted kind, but the raggedy kind. And they lived in that cave. And everything around they'd take captive and bring in there. And there's all kinds of bones in there. Maybe you haven't ever dieted, and maybe you've never fasted. But if you got raw meat every day, you could live off of that a very long time. So it's not bread. It's not water. I mean, it's just a natural way it could have happened. I'm just telling you it could have happened that way without it having to be a miracle. But of course it is a miracle. Because the way it had to happen, if this is what he did, and this is the way he provided it, the amazing thing is that he could work all of that out. How in the world? One of the interesting things about the color of the mountains, you got a black mountain sitting next to a white mountain, and there's all kinds of stones out there. You ever wondered about the breastplate? Where did they get all the jewels that went in the breastplate? This place is full of that sort of thing, but more than that, they had the Urim and the Thummim, right? Which was a black stone and a white stone. Black volcano, white volcano. Y'all go looking for a white volcano, see if you can find one. White volcano. Then the manna. We now know probably what that is. And it was caused from trees and bugs. But it was sweet. And it was sugary. Not everybody wanted it, though. All right. So I want to get down and just show you these places now. So this is from above. These are two different shots. One's a little closer. This is further out. This is it. There's actually 2 or 3 mounds of the white. And then this is the really big black volcano right next to it, which probably is the source of what we're mainly talking about here, which was the darkness that it created. By the way, you remember the darkness that could be felt? Okay? Ash. An ash cloud. That's one of the plagues. All right. So here it is. You can see it really well. What's behind back there, that's the black one. Let's see if I can. There it is. It's a lot higher than it looks in this. This is Google Earth. It's really tall. And so this is a white one here, and there's another one right here, and then a little one over here. But right here at the base of the black, right there where I'm pointing, they found some rock barriers. They don't know what it's about. In fact, there's some stuff all around this area. They don't know what it is. Some of them look like a circle with a V at the bottom of it. But this right here is strictly like fencing made out of rock. Do you remember what I read you a moment ago? We put up barriers so the people couldn't get there. Imagine this black volcano fully engulfed and the smoke coming out. And by the way, you remember the trumpet? When a volcano erupts, it doesn't always happen, but a lot of volcanoes will sing. Did you know they sing? They will sing. And they start out like a trumpet. They sing. And then they blow their top. Do you remember what it said? We read it a while ago. If you look at everything I've told you and you really did your homework like I have on this thing, I don't think there's another conclusion you can make. Now, I'm not going to go any deeper. We'll stop right there. I'll show you a few more pictures, maybe. Let's see what I got here. No, that's the wrong direction. Going the wrong direction. That's another picture. That's from above. I think that's it. I think I've covered it all. That's all the pictures. That's nothing. All right. So here's what I want you to do now. I want you to ask a question. Ask yourself this question. If God does providential things, is that any harder for him than making somebody walk on water? So I know what you're sitting there thinking, oh, so you don't believe in miracles. Oh, no. That's not what I believe at all. I believe that a lot of stuff that we've been talking about as providence is probably a miracle as far as we're concerned, because there's no way you could pull it off. If you wanted a storm to stop, do y'all remember when we prayed for the storm to stop? What are you doing praying for that? Is there any way that a human being can make that happen? Is that not, from our perspective, almost magical? I mean, it did change, did it not? Were we not saved from Milton and waves? I mean, we still saw wind up to around a 3. But imagine if it had come up the bay like we thought it was going to, right? Everybody thought it was. And imagine if this pond over here had actually broken. All of Riverview, not Riverview, but what's this place down here? River Hills. All of River Hills flooded. Yeah, that was what's about to happen. So that's God. I believe that's God. Okay? I believe God works in our life. I believe He works in your life. He's working all the time. And we like to categorize it because, see, that way, I don't have to pray for anything big. I can get real lazy. I only pray for things that I know are not miraculous. I pray for providential things. But what I'm trying to tell you is everything he did was him doing it. And it wasn't any harder for him to do it through a volcano than he was to do it from a rock that had never spit anything out, and him just to land on the top of it. He could do it any way he wants. He has the ability to do things that look like magic to us, but to him are not magic. They can be done. Yes, sir.
Does it matter a whole lot if it was a volcano that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, or if it was God raining from the heavens?
No.
As long as we understand that God is.
It doesn't matter. You're absolutely right. But what I want you to see is there are people that won't believe God can do anything today because they believe it was all miracles back then, and now it's providence over here, and God can't do it now.
Right, but if you watch the Discovery Channel these days, or a lot of channels on TV, they spend a lot of time trying to explain how these earthly things could have happened.
And it could be.
Almost taking away the credit from God.
See, right. Here's what I say, and I agree with that. That's what they're trying to do. But we're trying to do the opposite. So they're wrong over there. They're trying to eliminate God out of the equation. We're wrong over here. We're trying to eliminate God out of the equation because it's all miraculous, and I'm not supposed to know how it's happening, and therefore I'm not supposed to pray for stuff like that anymore. I think he does for them, but it wasn't for you and me. The things he did in the Exodus wasn't about our faith. It's about theirs, because most folks don't even believe it happened now. I think it's about, I'm trying to convince you that you need to start praying for bigger things. We need to pray for bigger things and not be afraid, because God's been doing stuff all along. And I'm telling you, to me, and we haven't even touched the hem of the garment on this subject, because there's a lot more evidence than I'm touching with you right now. Okay? So I know you're probably sitting there saying, this ain't much. Yeah, it's not. I'm just touching the hem of the garment on this stuff. I'm telling you straight up, I'm convinced we got it wrong on that. We just got it wrong. And it's the part of the story we missed. And because of that, it makes me think, well, what is God doing right now? You ask anything you want. Don't. We're always in the position of Job. Exactly. Here's the thing, though. Why do we do what I've been talking about? Okay? This class is on providence. Why is it important for me to teach you that God works providentially, but he would not dare go any further? Why is that a problem? I've been in church a long time, folks. I don't understand some of us. I've had brethren tell me you shouldn't pray for things. I've had people tell me, I had one brother tell me, you're going to end up a Pentecostal because you just pray about everything. What is the problem? What are we scared of? The Bible's still the Bible. What's she scared of? By the way, miracles aren't over. Let me prove it. There's a thing coming called the resurrection. Is that not a miracle? If you don't count anything we've talked about as a miracle tonight, all that are in the grave shall hear his voice and come forth. Is that happening on this planet? Have y'all read Revelation? It sounds like two prophets might show up at the end. How could that be? Oh, well, we're done with all that. How do you know we're done with all that? I know we're done with it right now, that nobody's walking on water. I haven't seen any of that. I've not seen anybody raise anybody from the dead. But I want to tell you something. To think that God isn't involved in our life is a ridiculous position to take. And to limit what he could choose to do is also a ridiculous position to take. To say that I can't pray for that. Oh, you can't pray for that, Brother Dutton. On what grounds do you think you have the authority to tell anybody what they can and cannot pray for? And why would you ever think that God couldn't do it? Because, well, the one's magical and the other's natural. Really? What do you think natural is? You don't think he's in control of the water flowing out of the ground wherever it flows? Or the trees growing? You don't think that the tree... Think about this just a second. What's keeping you alive? Do you understand your basic whole body? How it works? If you study it, it looks like a miracle now. Everything that's going on in there, you can't explain half of what you even know about now. And if you really studied it any deeper, you'd be going, oh, how in the world does DNA figure out how to bind itself together and break in two? Oh, well, that's a natural means. I'm not arguing with that. But who's doing it? You think it's doing it on its own? Pull God out of the equation, see how much anything's happening. There won't be anything here. If God's not involved, there's nothing. We're all dead. Believe and pray. That's all I'm trying to say tonight. There's a lot more there, but we're over time now. Thank you. I'm sorry if I irritated you too much going that direction, but I only had the one shot, so Robert can fix it all next week. Y'all have a good evening.